Hi, I'm Mike, PokeTips Mike, and while yesterday came and passed without any new Pokemon Sword and Shield trailers, today is turning out to be very promising. We got to see a cool new 30-second Pokemon commercial, which looked awesome and very nostalgic. But you want to know what's more interesting than a silly old commercial? The two new interviews we got today with GameFreak about Pokemon Sword and Shield. And while interviews themselves don't really sound that exciting, the stuff that we learned in them, ooh, it's spicy like that brand new Curry Dex. So even though two interesting interviews came out today, in this video I want to focus solely on the one that came out from our friends over at GameInformer.com. This interview is titled GameFreak Talks Sword and Shield Champion, Wild Area Interactions, and more. And trust me, there's a lot more in this interview. This one is really good. Let's jump into it. So like usual, this interview is done with director Shigeru Omori and producer Junichi Masuda of GameFreak. The first question they asked was about the champion Leone, and it says, what was the idea behind having regular interactions with the league champion Leone from the earliest stages in the game? And from what we know, that is very true. Leone is the one that gives us our starter Pokemon. We know him right from the beginning. In a lot of the other Pokemon games, we don't really get to see the champion until at least like the middle of the game, or even sometimes the late game. So aside from our boy Gary Oak and a professor, we don't really meet many of the champions very early on in the game. So let's see their answer. One of the biggest reasons for having you interact with the champion and being shown the prowess of the champion so early is that Sword and Shield is a continuation of traditional RPGs like X and Y and Sun and Moon. So really conveying that aspect of you're going to go on a journey, doing the gym battles, and there's this really powerful champion you want to aspire to defeat. That was one of the aspects we wanted to convey, so we put the champion in the story much more. So that's kind of a cool reasoning. They show you Leone very early in the game, like this is the guy to beat right here. This is your goal. You want to become stronger than him. And I'm down for it. I like it. Now the next question is a really short one. They basically just mentioned the Game Freak Easter egg on Leone's cape, but this third one is where things start to get really interesting. Game Informer asks, when you're in the wild area, do you have to set your game up to a certain status so players can interact with you? And Omori answers that question saying, so how it works is there's this feature called the Y-Com, and you can activate that to broadcast your status or what you want to do, like I want to trade, I want to battle, or whatever. And then that gets broadcasted out to anyone you've been matched up with in the back end. They'll see that, and if they want to reply, or if they're also saying they want to battle, it'll match you together, and then it goes into a synchronous connection. This is where it starts to get really interesting for us, though. One of the cool things you could do now is, in previous games, we had the Wonder Trade, where you could throw out a Pokemon and it would find someone to trade with, and the trade would happen and it would save the game. It was a very active process. We've kind of improved that. So now, with surprise trades, you can choose a Pokemon for trading, and it'll happen in the background, so while you're adventuring, it'll find someone to trade with, and after some time progresses, you'll see that your Pokemon was traded for something else. We found a way to make it happen more seamlessly without having to save and actively do it one at a time. Now, I don't think that's brand new information. I recall hearing this earlier, but it's definitely not something I'm hearing a lot of people talking about, and I really think we should be, because this improvement is incredible. I love doing Wonder Trade, don't get me wrong, but having to go into that whole separate screen and then sit there and watch your Pokemon get traded away is so tedious, especially when you're trying to Wonder Trade a lot of Pokemon at the same time. I love how in Sword and Shield they improved this so you could do Wonder Trades in the background while you're going out on your adventure exploring the region. You could catch Pokemon, breed Pokemon, battle, whatever you want to do, and you'll be able to do Wonder Trades in the background, which is such a good online improvement. I love it. Now Masuda adds down here, and it's not just exclusive to the wild area. I know we're just talking about the wild area right now, but this is probably going to be one of the more popular features that players engage with in the game. And I 100% agree, Masuda. Thank you so much. This is beautiful. I love it. Alright, so next question, GameInformer said, you spoke earlier about striving to make the ultimate Pokemon game with this first new generation on consoles. Do you think the length of this adventure is comparable to other Pokemon games? And Omori answers, I think it's hard to go into the details of that, but in terms of the volume or the amount of content in the main adventure, it's comparable to the other Pokemon generations that we've played. I think there's a lot of interesting activities that, for example, completing the Pokédex or really going out into the wild area and engaging with those mechanics, that'll add a lot of replay value for players who are looking to get really hardcore into that. And Masuda says down here, I feel like a lot of players these days will typically burn through content and try to get to the ending as fast as they can. From our perspective, we spent 3 years making it. Ha 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 ha! We do hope players will take their time through the adventure, but yeah, that's my perspective. Now, at first glance, for somebody that really likes to dig deep into the Pokemon games, that's a little scary because it makes it sound like these games might not have a lot of content. And I would be a little upset over this, but later on, they say something that makes me very, very happy. So let's just keep going. The next Game Informer question brings up how max raid battles have a difficulty as high or higher than anything we've ever seen in the main series before, and then they ask, are there any other parts in Sword and Shield that you think will be difficult for players? Omori responds to that with a very interesting answer. He says, with max raid battles, we have the star ranking system, and I think that's what he's talking about when he says you go to 5 stars, the highest ranked ones that are quite difficult. I've tried to play them on my own and lost many times. When you get to the highest stuff, you really need a good team coordination to defeat them. I can't really go into details, but I can say there's other content for players to engage with over the long term and more deeply after you finish the main story. Oh, thank you so much, Omori. If I'm reading this correctly, and if I'm not getting too excited about the game here, it sounds like there will be a few other things to do post-game in Sword and Shield that will engage you, that will be deep and last you a long time after the main story. Now, I think this is the first time they've really brought up the post-game in Pokemon Sword and Shield, since right now we barely even know anything about the main storyline, to be quite honest. One of the biggest concerns a lot of people have about Pokemon Sword and Shield is the games are not going to have a lot of content after you finish the main story. Sure, there's completing the Pokédex, sure there's exploring and catching a whole bunch of different types of Pokemon, breeding, battling, all that stuff, but what a lot of players miss about the Pokemon series are post-game areas, like in the Sinnoh games where you had the battle area, fight area, and survival area unlocked after defeating the Elite Four, or the battle frontier in quite a few different Pokemon games. Now, I definitely do not think that the Battle Frontier is returning in Sword and Shield, but I do think here, based on Omori's comments saying there's other content for players to engage with over the long term and more deeply after you finish the main story, I think there's a pretty good chance that we will see some sort of battle tower type facility after we complete the main Sword and Shield storyline. I'm really wondering what else they have that they just have not shown us yet, because this statement sounds so interesting. Other content for players to engage with over the long term and more deeply after you finish the main story. I just can't wait to see what it is. Alright, so moving away from the Sword and Shield post-game, GameInformer asks about the Pokemon timeline, which Masuda basically answers saying, it's a mess. The next question is, are we seeing Meltan and Melmetal in Sword and Shield? And Masuda answers, no comment. But come on, we have to see Meltan and Melmetal in Sword and Shield. It would be so bizarre if they weren't in these games. And just like the Melmetal question, the next few questions all get very short, basically non-answers from GameFreak over here because they don't want to reveal too much about the game. GameInformer asks if we could battle a Dark-type gym, how frequently you battle in the stadiums in the game, and if there's a possibility that you could battle all 18 gyms in Sword and Shield, and to those, Omori says basically no comment to all of those because he can't really answer them right now. And getting near the end here, we actually have a pretty interesting question about the development of Pokemon games, and GameInformer basically asks, at what point in development does the game go from being just one Pokemon game to 2 versions, like Pokemon Sword version and Pokemon Shield version? And Masuda basically answers that it's usually pretty late in the development of the games. They usually start with one base game, and then once they have the fundamentals down, they start splitting it into like what Pokemon appear in which version, and so on, and then they'll split it into 2 separate games. And that's typically how the process goes, except with a few exceptions captions like Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee when the team ran into some trouble because more people wanted to play the Eevee version. And our last question over here isn't related to Sword and Shield at all, but it is kind of interesting. They ask if you've seen the artist out there doing dives into the anatomy of Pokemon, and I had no idea people were doing art like this. This is so interesting. No wonder it's all covered up in vines and everything. That is really creepy to look at. And with that, my friends, that brings this interview to a close. I did skip over a few questions, so if you want to read the full article, I definitely recommend checking it out in the description below. In the comment section, tell me what you think about today's new information. What do you think of the online, and also, are you excited that we might finally get a decent post-game? Because again, they are hyping up the game right now. We might not have a crazy post-game, but because they said it is going to be deep and have some content to explore, I am very excited for it. I'm also losing my voice right now, so I should probably end this video. As always, my friends, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're new, because oh my god, I have so much good content on the way, I can't wait to show it to you guys. Follow me on Instagram at PokeTips Mike, and my friends, I'll be seeing you in the next one.